I had clinics that did behavioral and motivational change work. 85% of the people that came to those clinics, they were women. No matter what they came in for, what they were really needing was to understand themselves in relationships.
And not even just about the weight loss or the stop smoking they might have come in with.
Female attraction is based on challenge and opportunity. Well, what does commitment do?
Ruins both of them in a nanosecond. That's what we lovingly refer to as wedding cake poisoning.
People are looking at how they feel in one day about their husband, their boyfriend, and there's a new social media term called the ick.
I just read about that. The ick factor for men.
People worry about money, but they don't worry about money like they worry about being abandoned in affairs of the heart.
So, to what extent does a woman's state of mind control her sexual appetite, and how can she get back to feeling flirty, fun, sexy?
Well, the mistake is before they start dating.
Today, I am so excited to introduce to you Scott McFall, my personal mentor for the last 20 years. I have learned so much from him, I can't even begin to describe it. But today we're going to have an extra special treat because he's going to talk about one of our favorite topics, which is female attraction strategy to men. Might be a little bit on the minds of some of you out there. So, Scott, tell us about this topic. What do you think about this, and how did you come to know all you know?
Hi, Julie.
Hi.
You know that I had clinics in the Midwest that did behavioral and motivational change work, And this started in the 1980s. 85% of the people that came to those clinics for whatever it happened to be, weight loss, stop smoking, stress management, pain management, they were women. Only 15% of the people that came in were men. And I started to realize that no matter what they came in for, what they were really needing was to understand themselves in relationships. And it became like a training concept. Instead of therapeutics, it became, educational archetypes, the general way that people respond.
Mm-hmm. And not even just about the weight loss or the stop smoking they might have come in with. Right.
One of the ways to look at it is, in college, how many of you remember your friends going, I don't know why I'm dating this jerk?
Yep.
Or I want to like Brad, he's so nice.
He's so nice.
But,
boring. Yeah.
Yeah. So we find ourselves having to face that the strongest form of communication is behavioral. It's what you do, right?
And what you can see.
Yeah. And so if a person doesn't face how their nature, their instincts, how they happen to be works, they're going to make up a story in their head. So the difficulty is, how do you cut through the clutter of that story in their head and actually see what's going on? And the answer to that started with a guy named Ross Jeffries, who started to study why and how do female attraction feelings start. And that became his target. And he's one of the people that really specialized in this. But at the same time, as I was running all of those behavioral spots, I was also doing stage hypnosis, magic, comedy, performing in front of big audiences. And that's another laboratory for understanding how people behave.
Indeed.
So we started to help people to understand themselves, to understand their own way of reacting, and the phases of how people respond at different times in a relationship, and why. Now, decades later, science has brought us much further. There are people that are much more detailed than I would ever be, scientists, chemists, geneticists, who now realize that there are actual genetic and biochemical reasons for some of these switches that have nothing to do with our our personality behaviorally at all, but rather
things like hormones and biochemistry, endocrine system,
gene compatibility, a bunch of other things that are very interesting. So back in the day when Jeffries was studying this sort of thing, he noticed that female attraction is based on challenge and opportunity. Those two things, challenge and opportunity. Well, what does commitment do?
Ruins both of them in a nanosecond. That's what we lovingly refer to as wedding cake poisoning.
Yeah, gold or wedding cake poisoning. Yeah. So the thing that happens to a perfectly wonderful young woman who goes into her attraction strategy and everything's great. She's even maybe in the right place. But nobody teaches her that what's going to happen is when that commitment takes place, it's going to take the challenge down and her feelings are going to radically change.
And let's be clear, most of what we're talking about in terms of opportunity for the literal people out there is literally they have lots of opportunities to date various people and do all that sort of thing. The challenge usually is this.
Can be. But the challenge might be it's a little naughty.
That too?
Or the challenge might be like Romeo and Juliet, the families don't want it, let's say. Romeo and Juliet is a brilliant work of art because our author, that author knows the more forbidden that attraction, the
better
more
it is.
intense that attraction is going to become.
Exactly.
So the higher the challenge, the higher the attraction on the female side specifically. Men behave differently. When they're younger, it's very similar. But as they get a little older, they kind of become single-minded and their heart kind of goes in one spot more. This makes them seem simple and makes them less challenging. Mm-hmm. So as, I don't know what to call it, maybe God's divine sense of humor, the guy gets simpler and simpler as he matures, which makes him less and less of a puzzle, which actually makes him less and less of a challenge.
And we get more complicated.
Right. But if the female mind, there's a really good book, I don't remember the name of the author, but it's Why Gender Matters. It's a relatively recent book. And he talks about the difference in hearing frequencies between men and women, the various biological differences between men and women, and why those things are necessary, why those factors are necessary. And so when we look at this, we realize a girl is supposed to go through these phases, a woman is supposed to go through these phases. But nowadays, nobody teaches that you're going to go through these cycles over the course of a few years, and people look at what's happening today or what's happening this hour. So now on the internet, people are looking at how they feel in one day about their husband, their boyfriend. And there's a new social media term called the ick.
I just read about that.
Yeah.
The ick factor for men. Yeah.
And this is ridiculous because it has to do with what's going on with your blood sugar, what's going on with your hormones, and how are you reacting that day. And the issue is that if you were to pick how you feel about someone based on how you react to them in those moments,
good luck with that. Good luck with that.
So the archetype, the bell curve of how these phases of relationships happen to go, which we're covering in Romance ESP that we're currently writing, we know that we need to see a lot longer time period, don't we?
Most definitely.
And so, for those of you out there, really, it's a multi-year idea that you need to know to understand yourself. It's a multi-month or a multi-week or a multi-year bell curve. It's not a how do I feel today, how do I feel this week?
Well, realistically, there's not one single situation in your life. You could take a look at one snapshot in the moment and call that either representative or a good idea to focus on.
Well, right.
Like if you didn't like your job one particular day, you deal with it, it'll get better.
I think that the intimate response to relationships and the fear of getting stuck in that deeper connected intimacy, the triggering of abandonment, feelings, separation anxiety. Certainly people worry about money.
Yeah.
But they don't worry about money like they worry about being abandoned in affairs of the heart.
True that.
Yeah. So female attraction and female deep love are two totally separate things.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why in a romance novel, there's always the risky person and there's always the safe person.
Safe guy.
And they're switching between the safe guy and the risky person.
Yep.
There's a fellow that used to do men's weekends who used to say, be the guy she'd want to run around on you with.
Yeah.
Kind of thing. In order to be like both sides of that fun, And it's really the truth that there's so much leverage on the female side of those relationships. And there always has been.
That's true. People don't know that very well, but it is true.
So we're talking about, how does a girl get attracted? And then how does a woman stay attracted after commitment? These are two totally different things.
And not get disillusioned because the initial attraction or infatuation isn't the same.
Right.
A lot of people think it should be, and that's not going to happen.
Right. Well, you work in that particular field and you hear it every day.
Mm-hmm.
But I can tell you that sitting around in that office for years and years and years, trying to find out why is this person not motivated to take care of herself? Why is this person not excited about what she's doing? And it's pretty easy to fix. There's a game that we used to play with my buddies and myself when I was training in this hypnosis and NLP thing, where one of my magic assistants would go up, and one of my friends was not very socially aggressive. He didn't want to talk to people in public. He was a great guy, but he didn't.
Shy.
Yeah, he didn't. So my magician's assistant would walk up to him in the middle of a bunch of people and slap him and say, "I can't believe what you did to me." And she'd storm off. And
Well, I know what that did to the rest of the girls.
all the girls in the whole place just swarmed this
Swarmed him,
fellow,
yep.
And we're just asking him to dance and, all kinds of things. And he would just be like, and my assistant would just lean on her chair going, "You're welcome," And she got this, she got this. She knew her friends. She knew herself, Yeah. And so she would look at it, and they were friends. They were pretty close buddies, that we all, were hanging out at the shows and whatnot. And she understood this politic that exists. If you're in college and you want to study this, sit in a chair in the corner by yourself and just watch all of the people walk into the club. And what you'll see is the women that walk into that club, they look at each other. They don't look at the men.
That's
they
right.
look at each other. And as they look at each other, they're finding out, I don't know what to call it.
Top girl.
Well, let's say maybe threat, no threat. But it's really a measurement of how do I feel about myself as I walk into this room? Am I okay as I walk into this room? Right? So the hardest thing to teach young couples is in a ballroom dancing picture, all of the girls and all those paintings that you see are all in different outfits.
All unique.
Yeah. The guy they're all in the same black tux. And that's because if you shoot one of us, you can just put another one of us in there. We're interchangeable when you get right down to it.
Sad but true.
Yeah. And of course, in this very self-expressive age, we don't want to admit this.
Yeah. But we can here. It's a safe space.
Yeah, that's right. So what happens is a couple comes in. You've seen it 1,000 times. I can tell you we could film couples walking into your clinic for a year. And it would be almost 100% the girl walking in, upright, upset, motivated, storming into the waiting room, and the guy would come in.
Like a whip puppy.
And already there's a problem because he is not safe in himself. He's not self-accepting. He believes, I must dislike me because she is upset.
Exactly.
He's thinking, in order to be a good person, I must have her approval.
And make her happy.
Yeah. And we can talk about what that does in him later, but with her, it's going to hurt her ability to respect him. It's going to hurt her ability to stay attracted because he's not a challenge.
Nope.
So it's counterintuitive, but you really, as a guy, need to know that you can't end up acting like your person you're dating is your sister or your mom. You have to act like it's a romance.
Absolutely. So what do you think the biggest mistake guys make when they come in that scenario where they're just kind of, oh, geez, this is so bad, and she's full of steam, bitching and complaining? What's the mistake he's making?
Well, the mistake is before they start dating.
Well, that's true.
Because it's inside. It's an assumption inside that if this woman is upset or disappointed, number one, it's my fault.
He's the bad guy, right.
Number two, there's something I'm supposed to do about it. And number three, I should be in self-pity because I'm not getting approval or admiration. And that self-pity should make her care about me again. That's the strategy that fails.
Right.
Self-pity and the need for sympathy, simply put, is the least attractive possible position a man can put himself in. It's catastrophic. Yet, wow, does it happen?
A lot. So the ideal would be that a man's self-esteem should never rise or fall based on whether or not the girl likes him or approves of him or is happy, because there's all kind of things that affect our mood, our state of mind, our emotions that largely don't have anything to do with anybody else necessarily.
And what you're saying is true, but it's difficult to communicate the fact that he should care what's happening with this woman he loves.
Sure.
He should care and want to handle it right. He does have a responsibility to handle it right.
Absolutely.
But the issue is when this woman is finally in a commitment and she's going through hormone changes, her behavior is going to test whether or not that environment is safe at certain times as progesterone goes up, as estrogen goes up and down. She's going to test whether that environment is safe as just a part of who she is.
Yep.
And it's going to be somewhat confrontational during that time. Or at least patience is going to be quite different.
But they need to know that part is not about them.
Right. And this is so hard because if the guy uses this as a license to not care,
That would
or
be
to
terrible. Yeah.
or to be detached or something, it could be quite creepy. So it's how far do you go in just saying, hey, when things are off after that commitment and things are being tested, how do you just kind of stand your ground and float in the right space and check yourself with whether or not you're respecting this other person and seeing what's going on. But it's an art form.
How do you check yourself as a guy? Because that's a big point. You do have to stand your ground at some level. You can't be uncaring, just be a jerk. Your self-esteem has to stay as much as possible consistent regardless of what she's doing. So how do you actually check yourself?
You know, there's a movie, and I don't remember which movie it is, but there's an elderly couple in the film, right? And the wife is giving the husband a hard time as he's leaving the house. And he says to her, you know, it's just this kind of spice that keeps our marriage interesting, you know, right in the middle of it. And it's just such a great older guy piece of wisdom right in that moment, you know. But it's difficult because if you get leveraged where you're feeling some kind of shame or triggering some kind of guilt or then you're going to be over-controlled in a way that is unuseful to you, and it's actually unloving to her. So I think the most important thing to do is wait. How you check yourself is wait. Like, watch and wait. There's a reason men talk less.
And what is that reason? A lot of women want to know that.
Well, if you're on trial, sometimes you just don't want to put on a defense because they already screwed up the prosecution. And so, you know, the thing is that when you're a guy and someone that you know who you love very much is going through stress or in a moment, they're usually going to figure it out themselves. They're going to go all the way around the things they're feeling and thinking. And they're perfectly lovely. You've known them a long time. You know they're smart. You know they're going to come up with it. And if you just stay out of their way, they're going to just be fine.
But then wouldn't the girl a lot of times feel like, oh, he doesn't care, he's not paying attention, he's not connected, he's not listening?
But you can do that with your eyes. You can do that with your gestures. You can do that with your attention. You don't have to do that by opening your mouth and putting your foot inside of your mouth. You can just be there. You can just watch and connect and all of that. You know, we use a different company online. There's a nail in your head.
It's not about the nail.
It's not about the nail. That video is the structure of the conversation where a young woman is presenting a problem where she just wants to be heard out, and the guy keeps trying to solve the problem.
Right. And she gets more and more frustrated. You can
Right.
find that on YouTube. It's called It's Not About the Nail, It's Hysterical.
The people who produced that produced a lot of great videos.
Yeah,
it's
I bet.
a good one. What I'm getting at here is it's classic that one person is talking in a process manner, wanting to talk through and think through out loud what's going on. The person who's hearing this process, who cares about this other, is outcome-based.
Yes.
And they're wanting to jump to the thing that would fix it. But this talking and going through the process is the ritual of connection.
Now, by the way, this is all done with like literally a nail in her forehead that she's not paying attention to. She just wants to talk about the pain and how her sweaters get snagged and it's awful and all of this stuff. And he goes, but you have a nail in your head.
Yeah.
And she's like, it's not about the nail. So she forces him to listen and, of course, doesn't get the nail dealt with.
Right. But let's take this a step further. If challenge and opportunity is the attraction strategy that gets the attention of women, what if their career right then is a big challenge? It's going to own their awareness during that time.
Right.
What if the kids are an amazing challenge? That challenge and opportunity isn't just about attraction and sexuality. It's also about where does their attention go at all? Right? So as a guy, if you love somebody and they work in this wonderful way, and it's not broken, it's how it's designed to be, you've got to be willing to not be the star of the show all the time. And if that relationship is healthy or if she's healthy, you've got to trust that it's going to come around a certain way back to you.
Just be patient.
Yeah, the guy who has to have that awareness on him and is nervous about other people and nervous about other guys, basically a beta guy who's stressed about all that, he's not going to have the patience to just let it be. The Beatles were not stupid people.
It's a great song.
Yeah. So you got to just let it go. And that stability, that kind of being an oak tree in the situation is going to be what works. And it's going to work because basically, first of all, it's very rare. Mm-hmm. There aren't that many men who will just calmly abide what's going on and just wait. But there's a kind of trustedness in that.
Mm-hmm. Oh, very much so, yeah.
And feeling trusted is great.
Yes, it is.
You know? So what we're talking about now is how do you not step on their attraction strategy? Because if you're jumping in and solving, it becomes condescending. And of course, mansplaining.
Mansplaining. Oh, we hate that.
Yeah. And so, I've been mansplaining to female clients for what is now almost 40 years.
Yeah.
I get away with it all day. They write me checks and stuff.
Just so you guys understand, Scott has personally seen probably at this point upwards of 50,000 people. Not kidding.
Yeah.
Not kidding.
Yeah, during the time I was in that practice, about 20,000 people came through all those locations. And of course, I had other people working for me too. But it's quite a sampling, anecdotally. It's not really a controlled environment, but anecdotally, you see a lot of stories. Mm-hmm. And as a guy, the important thing is she gets to pick.
We are the pickers.
You're the selectors.
We are the selectors.
And so when you get picked, just be glad. like don't do anything, don't freak out. Don't be afraid of it. Don't do anything wrong.
But doesn't that have to do with maturity level too? Because a more immature guy, if he's not picked, would tend to get pissy or
Actually,
difficult.
An immature guy, when he is picked, gets pissy because he's afraid of the other guys. He's afraid of the
Competition.
attention. He's jealous. He's freaking out. He's envious. And the prettier or the more amazing the girl, whether it's money or looks or whatever, the insecure guy, he's going to wreck this so fast because he's going to think he's going to be made to look stupid. And he's not going to get over it. It's going to haunt him in his head like ridiculously, And you talk to 100 young guys, the story's always the same, They're freaking out in exactly the same way. It's like they have a spot in central casting and they give them all the exact same script. It's true. It's actually kind of creepy, So I guess what I'm saying is this girl is going to go through this challenge and opportunity. if it happens to be that you're having a wonderful relationship with this woman and you're on the guy side, stay out of your own way. Just stay out of your way.
So in your experience, I'm guessing, similar to mine, that women really have no idea these phases and ups and downs they're going to go through, whether it's hormonally or just aging or whatever. And I just find this overriding thought that people think it's supposed to be and feel like it was in the beginning. And they get very disillusioned, and then we start talking divorce and separation and all sorts of things.
Imagination is what built the relationship in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
So you might as well trust it, and you might as well use it correctly, Families are hard. Raising kids is hard. Staying economically viable is hard.
Very.
Not procrastinating with the amount the world is changing and keeping up with the digital world is hard. It is, especially for those of us who aren't 20 and didn't grow up with it.
Mm-hmm.
So all of this makes your cortisol go up, which then lowers your testosterone. It changes your... And I'm not a medical doctor. We have the medical advisor to our team, but we do know that a lot of what starts to happen is a cascade from stress that starts to alter sex drive, starts to alter how you're sleeping. Right after a baby is born, a lot happens, So sleep, work stress, real trauma, for that matter, real and dramatic trauma. How many of your couple clients have gone through the death of a child or horrible things like that? Yeah. And the thing is that trauma just changes the biochemistry in the endocrine system and subsequently in the brain and the neurotransmitters to the point where they're not able to find that state of mind that they had to begin with. It's not there. And so the only solution is that they re-meet. If they do desire or love each other or want to stay together, there's only one way to go, which is to have a new relationship that is not fixing the old one at all. There is such a thing as enough trauma to shock the nervous system to the point where you cannot find your way back to a previous feeling. That does happen.
Mm-hmm.
It does. So if a woman has an attraction strategy and the fellow that she's with happens to have his car break down and he goes to a pig farm and he's walking on the pig farm to get a gas can. And
I know where this is going to go.
And then he smells like the pig farm when he
Right.
comes home. I've had people in my office crying, saying, once I smelled him after he got the gas can, I just couldn't ever touch him again. And the thing is, this is a real feeling. This is not pretend.
Mm-hmm.
Because her biochemistry and her shifting and that olfactory sense being right next to the brain, well, we've used hypnosis or neurolinguistics and stuff to help people to desensitize from that in the past. But when people act like everyone's supposed to be sturdy, everyone's supposed to be able to tolerate everything.
Not true. And it's funny how people don't really realize the whole smell thing is a big deal. It's a very big deal.
Yeah, I mean, I've had people decide not to get divorced just because of changing toothpaste. I mean, I know it sounds ridiculous, but it's the truth. It's the truth. So, I don't know where else you want to go with that, but the two things we're talking about are how do people get attracted, and then what happens after commitment.
Right. Well, as you're talking about the state of mind, so I know one question on the mind of a lot of listeners is going to be, so to what extent does a woman's state of mind control her sexual appetite, and how can she use that to get back to feeling flirty, fun, sexy? Because what I hear a lot is, I just don't feel it anymore, or I just don't feel like it anymore.
Well, I'll tell you what I used to do in the 1980s and 1990s,
Can we still do that now?
Yeah, probably.
Okay.
It's just the woke and the politically correct has become so intense that for those of my friends who are entertainers or comedians, we all worry about it,
With good reason.
Stepping on everyone's. I don't want to freak anybody out.
Again, we're in a safe place. If they don't like it, they can change the channel.
Okay, good. Well, there you have it. It was her. But what we do is a client would come in and we'd be doing the SANS model, the sleep, adventure, sexuality, and nutrition with regard to weight loss, helping them with are they sleeping right? Do they have enough adventure? Is their romance and sexuality going well, or are they repressed? And is their nutrition right? And we'd be talking through all of this, and inevitably I would hear, if I had a 100-client week during those years, 70 times I would hear, I just don't have any sex drive anymore.
Mm-hmm.
I just don't have any sex drive. I've got the kids, I've got this, I don't have any sex drive anymore. So one day, I just went, who's your favorite movie star when you were growing up, when you were a teenager? And they'd come up with whoever it was, Sean Connery back then or somebody, I'd go, I want you to imagine that in 6 months, you're going to be on a desert island with Sean Connery. And you're going to be able to be in a romantic situation with him on a desert island.
Because it's a deserted desert island.
And over that 6 months, and nobody's going to find out, so nobody's going to get hurt by this. And if you're going to be with Sean in 6 months on that island, how are you going to take care of yourself over that 6 months? Oh, I would take care of myself really good.
Yeah,
and then I'd say, and would you have a sex drive? They go, yeah, And I'd go, well, so what you're saying is you don't have a sex drive for the situation that you're in because of the commitment making this go down with regard to the challenge. And we'd talk through that, and I'd go, so you could access it if you were seeing it anew, or you could access it if you realized it's something you want to chase instead of something that you're stuck at.
Or trying to avoid.
Right. And so we'd begin to recognize, it's not that my sex drive has changed, it's that my situation that I am stuck in is creating a feeling that I don't like with regard to attraction and romance. And the thing is, I would say, do you love him? Yeah. I mean, do you want to stay there? Yeah. And they weren't there for relationship help. They were there for something else that just came up in the scheme of things, And so, yes, we'd be able to say, okay, well, let's chase that the same way. Right? And in NLP, we notice, some people notice they're totally loved when they see you do something for them.
Mm-hmm.
A gift. Cleaning up the socks off the floor.
Bring me some coffee. Yeah. Put the clothes from the washer into the dryer.
Yeah. Some people, it's hearing I love you. They feel totally loved. Others, it's touch, right? Obviously, one of the big things that comes up is you'll have a visual love strategy person and a kinesthetic love strategy person where one needs a lot of touch and a lot of sexuality, and the other one needs to see you do something.
Right.
Or John Kappas, who was Florence Henderson's husband years ago, hypnotist in California, he noticed that people are either they want emotional needs met first and then they're physically intimate, or they want physical needs met first and then they will be emotionally intimate. So some people want physical to feel safe for emotional, while others want emotional to feel safe for physical. This doesn't necessarily have to do with gender.
Right.
So we realize that we do need to understand what the other person's routine is, and we want to meet it. Generally, with women in a committed relationship, we want them to be able to get far enough away from it to have a challenge to go back to get it. So a needy guy is going to step all over that and just wreck that buzz,
Right.
It's tragic that when we're raising daughters, we tell
Don't
them
teach
nothing about any of this,
That's why we have this.
Yeah. Yeah, well, it's luckily, I mean, it has paid my bills, But
giving you some interesting days.
Yeah, but I think it's important to recognize that when mom is stressed and going through these same things in the couple, and a daughter is coming up in that family, how would you know to teach it?
You wouldn't.
You wouldn't. So there's The New People Making by Virginia Satir is a great book that helps to see how families work.
Mm-hmm.
What are your thoughts about the very thing we're talking about?
Well, I'm often struck by how much and how often women do not understand that their mood, their emotions and state of mind dominate, as I say, everything in the house with a heartbeat, including the dogs, possibly not the goldfish, but everything else. And it's most of the time they're oblivious to that, which is really unfortunate because the power to heal, the power to connect, the power to have fun really lies with the girl. And so when the guy's being needy or there's disconnection of some kind, however that happens, it's really a shame because it's so easy to change if that's what you want to do. And to get the awareness that that's the way it goes.
Yeah, that's insightful that people don't know their own power is what I hear you saying.
They don't.
I think. People are either trying to prove that they're free, secure, competent, that they belong, or that they're self-expressive and unique.
Mm-hmm.
If they're trying to prove freedom, that's often when they think they lack freedom.
Right.
The issue with that is those folks, I am one of them. That's kind of my core need. And the problem is you have to get over a tendency. And that tendency is to be punitive when disturbed, punishing when disturbed, or use leverage when disturbed. And the issue with some of these people you're talking about is they don't know they have power.
No.
And when they feel powerless or they feel stressed and they feel like they don't have control, that means they're going to go after control in a huge way. In my experience, that can end up being emotional blackmail, withholding.
Taking sex off the table.
Yeah.
And just being mean.
Well, yeah. And it can also cause an issue where it should be mom and dad are like this and the kids are over here.
That very seldom happens.
Yeah. Usually it's mom and the kids and dad's over here.
Right.
And so it should be mom and dad and the kids over here. This means that you can't separate these two parents and the kids don't get the power of triangulating the parents, right? So that not only, and that's the thing that I think we're skipping in the world, is we're forgetting that couplehood traditionally leads to parenthood.
Yes, it does.
And it's when it leads to parenthood that these people need to be mature enough to understand themselves so that the kids are raised by two people that are heading, relatively speaking, in one direction.
And that they also have the same view that their couplehood is the most important thing. Being a mom is something you do. It's not something you are.
Right. Well, yes. There was Mary Holmes Pilster was a woman who took one of my stage trainings years ago, and she had a product called Mommy Track. And it was actually an infomercial way back. And I believe her mom was also a famous person in California doing this job. And she pointed out that Mommy Track is kind of a toxic track, that it's very important to be an adult and have your needs met correctly and then be dealing with the kids as a separate kind of track, but to never accidentally fall into this mommy track. And there's all kinds of reasons for that. And the way I used to lecture on that years ago is don't run your family like you accidentally became a bear. Because mama bears run off with the kids,
yes.
and the males are seen as a threat, and we are not bears.
So here's something to think about. The best way you can actually be a mom is to have lots and lots of sex with the dad.
Well, yes, or respect the dad.
Which is kind of the same thing.
Yeah, it can be.
Yeah.
It can be.
Respect the dad and be in the couplehood as your primary thought. It's not the thing that's going to take up the most time in the day for sure, but it does need to be front of mind.
I think that, one of the ways to say it is the kids do what you do, they do not do what you say.
Definitely.
And so if you're loving, happy, caring, connected, respectful, at peace with what's going on, then that's what they're going to do. And that's the bottom line. Kids are not your friends. Couples get wrecked all the time because one of the parents precociously develops the kids by acting like they're miniature adults.
Happens a lot.
Yeah. And what happens then is there's this kind of mini friendship where this kid does not have any boundaries with that couple. And there are a lot of very odd, esoteric, academic philosophies on how to animalize your household with these kids, and whatnot. And it's my experience, having worked with so many adults in the business consulting that I do, that grew up homeschooled, that are now adult business people. And there's a lack of broad flexibility within them,
Right.
And when I'm trying to teach it, they're frequently stumbling over what I'm saying and doing because of the superiority of how they grew up in their mind, right? So there are all kinds of these parental philosophies now where these people have never been forced against their will to socialize with all of the people that are different than their family.
And that is the best definition of maturity, isn't it? The ability to manage frustration, frustrated desire, or not getting your way without acting out. So this idea that you have to be frustrated, maturity only really happens against your will.
Right, which is why reasoning with the child is, when
Deadly.
the child is very small, before 7 years old, really the kid is learning to find their limits. So this does matter because that child will upstage your couplehood, and you can love your child and still protect your couplehood, is the point. You can. It can be done. And, you're right when you say, boy, do people want to raise tiny adults. They're not smarter because they remembered information. They have Google.
Yeah.
They're not smarter because you rammed information into their head. They're not getting more mature. They're just getting more arrogant.
And more tools to argue.
Yeah, they're becoming better lawyers for their own lack of experience.
Right.
Great lawyer for nothing. So the idea of young childhood is to frustrate desires and give rewards in such a way that the child realizes that the real world is different than their map in their head. Done brilliantly or explained brilliantly by Dr. Milton Erickson in the book My Voice Will Go With You, The Teaching Tales of Milton Erickson.
And in that book, especially the story, I Don't Has to.
I Don't Has to. That's right. That's the story that I'm referring to. And the parental philosophy of that child discovering their limits, knowing how to respond to outside feedback. If you don't have that, how do you protect your couplehood with this young child? And so bad romances use children as scapegoats.
Yep. Time fillers and attention sucks. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And they don't know they're doing it.
Mm-hmm. No, they think they're being good parents.
Right. Years and years ago, in a situation that will remain nameless, I had a couple come into one of the centers. I won't even say what town it was. And they were both graduate level PhDs, and they had adopted a child. And the child was a very brilliant young kid, under the age of 10. And the kid just had total control of this household. I mean, total control. And they brought the kid in because the kid was having problems saying something. I can't remember what exactly. But within 5 or 6 minutes, I had the kid saying it just fine in the waiting room, which was making the parent upset.
Yeah, of course.
Okay. And how I had done it is I did a magic trick for the child and got the kid laughing and playing. And then I tricked the kid into answering questions that had the thing
word
he
in
couldn't
it,
say.
yeah.
And I got him to do it like, I don't know, probably 12 or 24 times. And then the young child realized I had him. And he's like, he's super mad. But that was nothing compared to the parents, because they really wanted to believe there was an issue they were trying to solve. They were very smart people, and they had become obsessed like a person at a casino with a slot machine. Am I going to win? Am I going to lose? Am I going to win? Am I going to lose? And they wanted to figure out this problem so bad. So when it was shown that there really wasn't one, that wasn't a relief. They were super pissed. And the thing is, why is that? Because they really didn't want to be pissed at each other.
Right.
The secondary benefit of the issue was that they didn't have to cope with what was going on with each other. And the thing is...
That happens a lot.
Oh, man. So it's easy to see from 10 miles away, every friend they have, the kid, themselves, everyone's seeing this except them.
Right.
So they're like wandering around naked going, don't you like my new suit? Isn't my new suit great? And they're so well educated and so brilliant, and they really were, that they just believe themselves.
Right.
So it's sad because they might have had a wonderful romance. They might have had love and joy and attraction and all kinds of wonderful things. But they didn't. Mm-hmm. And it's not that young child's fault.
No.
So I hope that answers the question of how do everyday things get in the way and actually annihilate the whole strategy either way.
Mm-hmm. It does. It does, actually. And so, with a great deal of thanks for being with us today, peace out.